All of life's joys are complex problems. Most of the solutions that we get from technology and science are complicated solutions. The biggest problems that we have right now have to do with the fact that we want to solve our complex problems like love, and we're trying to do it with complicated solutions like Instagram.
How would you think about the biomarkers of happiness, right? So if we think about my world, we have so many biomarkers. It's one of the things that makes our job relatively straightforward. We have blood-based biomarkers. We have biomarkers of performance, your VO2 max, strength. We can look at body composition, all of these things. If someone comes to you and you were the doctor in this sense, they want to obviously first have some sort of assessment of happiness, and then they want to be able to track their progress. Is that a silly idea here because it's so self-evident?
No, it's not a silly idea at all. And I've thought about it so much, and I've had dozens of entrepreneurs want to engineer the idea and appize it. Because I could popular class, Harvard, you got to be able to turn it into some sort of a product. And the way that you would do that is by having relatively complicated but measurable phenomena that you could look at and get better at. And that's would be a proxy marker for the underlying construct, which is happiness. Here's the problem with that. Here's the fundamental problem. It's a different species of challenge. We talked about this one time before, about the difference between there's two types of problems in human life. There's complicated problems and complex problems. The complicated problems are really, really tricky and take a lot of computational horsepower and learning. But once you solve them, you can replicate the solution with effortless ease forever, right? You can do the biomarkers. Complex problems are incredibly easy to understand, but impossible to solve. Right? They're impossible to solve because there are too many permutations of what can actually happen. So you're like Formula One racing, right? And so I'm going to set up this unbelievable, I'm going to take a bunch of Unix machines and I'm going to wire them together, and I'm going to have 250,000 lines of code, and I'm going to simulate every F1 race for the rest of the year. You're an idiot. Why? Because F1 is complex. That's why it's interesting and you want to watch it. That's why it's so exciting to watch a Formula One race, because it's complex. I know what winning looks like. You cross the finish line before the other guys. It's the simplest thing in the world, but a million different things can happen. A quadrillion things can actually happen. That's the fun of it. All of life's joys are complex problems. Most of the solutions that we get from technology and science are complicated solutions. The biggest problems that we have right now have to do with the fact that we want to solve our complex problems like love, and we're trying to do it with complicated solutions like Instagram. A complicated solutions to a complex problem will always leave you cold and make you worse off. It basically says, I'm going to get rid of all the Formula One races because it's dangerous, and I'm going to have nothing more than computer simulations of it. It's like, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. That's the dumbest thing I've actually ever heard, right? So that's the key thing for us to understand. And that's the reason I can't appize this. Happiness is a complex and adaptive human phenomenon, and you can only get it by living it and working on it and making progress and failing, just like your marriage. I just described your marriage.
Now, in that sense, at least I get feedback in my marriage, because when I screw up and I apologize, I see that my wife forgives me.
Right.
When I make a mistake, I feel the lenience and the love. When I need the help is there.
Right.
So indirectly, I'm getting really good feedback. And conversely, if a person was to take an honest assessment of their marriage and realize, like, we're two ships passing and, we don't fight, but we don't have anything in common. If they were thoughtful enough, they'd recognize things are not well. So they'd have a barometer there. Do you think that using others as a mirror is the best way to get the true barometer of happiness? Or do we rely on our own internal assessment?
We wind up with our own internal assessment, but it's not good enough to have that be one single metric. How happy am I? So we have three so far today in the conversation: levels of enjoyment, satisfaction, meaning. We can know whether or not we have those things on the basis of the science that we've talked about and the ways that we can get better at it and practice it. The techniques for getting more of those things are faith, family, friends, and satisfying work. I break it down even further, by the way. I don't try to make it complicated. It's still complex. But I have a spreadsheet that I keep on my own happiness that are the micronutrients behind the macronutrients, dozens of dimensions. And I'm rating myself. I weight those things according to my experience of how they feed into the macronutrients. And then I have scores on those dimensions, and I want to make progress every year. I do it on my birthday and half birthday. My half birthday is coming up in November. November 21st, my half birthday, and I'm going to fill out my spreadsheet and say, I'm not on pace to get the progress that I had in my strategic plan for my happiness for next May, when my birthday comes around again, what are the things I need to actually touch up? So what am I doing? I'm kind of doing a curve fit to the complex problem I'm trying to solve with a little bit of a complicated solution. I give all those dimensions to my students and I say, look, do the reading, do the work. I've read 10,000 articles about this, so you don't have to. But I do try to break it down a little bit so that I can have a multidimensional problem. One of the things that we know with complex problems is the more multidimensional you make it, the more likely you are to get better solutions. The worst thing that you can do is like, how do I feel today? That's you're not going to make progress under those circumstances.
What are some of the micronutrients that go into this for you?
It'll be the warmth of my marriage, the relationship with my kids, how well things are going with respect to the value I'm trying to create with my career, the stability that I have in my friendships, the degree to which I feel like I'm properly philanthropic, right? The interest I'm taking in my professional life, the closeness that I have with, certain intimates in my life, the extent to which I'm avoiding or finding conflict in my work relationships. All these things go into my spreadsheet, right? Because I know that they really matter across these three dimensions. The extent to which I'm enjoying my life over the course of each day. And I do these particular ratings and then I put them together with a weighted sum across them. And I've messed with a weighted sum and I've messed with it and experimented with it until I said, yep, that seems about right. That seems about right with respect to what I'm experiencing at this point in my life. So you make it a multidimensional problem. There's a huge body of social science that talked about imperfect linear models, where you take big problems and make them into a bunch of little tiny problems, and that curve fits to the complex thing you're trying to solve.
Now you evaluate that twice a year.
Yeah.
And therefore you can't have it be dependent on the technical noise of the day or the week. You're trying to answer these questions through the lens of the last half of the year.
Yeah. And if I'm having like a big conflict with my wife on my birthday, I don't do it that day.
Don't do it that day.
Yeah. I don't do it that way, because I don't want the noise. Is what it comes down to. Right. And if something really, really great happens to me, the book is doing great. I don't answer it that day either, because I don't want my neurochemistry to be affecting it unduly. Although at this point in my life, I've been doing it for 25 years. I'm pretty cold and calculating.
I think that would be a reasonable app to start with.
Could be. Yeah, and that's very different than the biomarkers for sure, because I don't actually know what you would look at look, what are the biomarkers? I want to make sure I don't have a problem with my cortisol, right? I want to make sure that, my hormones are balanced. I want to make sure that my adrenal system is not
But when I went biomarkers,
but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, no. Yeah, when I went biomarkers, I didn't mean blood-based biomarkers. I mean anything that is either subjective or objectively measurable that would serve as a proxy for a dashboard effectively,
right.
A dashboard of your happiness health.
And in fact, I have that.
Yeah,
I do. And so it's imperfect. It's imperfect, but that's like my fantasy football team or something.
And is there any plans to share that, to make that something that others can use besides your students? It sounds like they have access to this.
I should do that. I actually should do that. That would be an interesting thing. I'd be very interested in experimenting on that with maybe your clients to see to what extent that could be a useful tool, just to see.